When a simple question from a little girl breaks the walls of a billionaire's heart, two lives change forever, proving that kindness can bridge any world. Thomas Bellamy was one of the richest men in the country. People called him a genius, a visionary, even a legend. He had started his first tech company when he was just 21, and by 30, he had become a billionaire. His face appeared on magazine covers. His name was known in business circles all around the world, and his companies ruled the digital world. But despite all his money, power, and success, Thomas Bellamy felt something was missing. He lived alone, in a massive glass mansion high above the city. The house was beautiful, modern, full of art, technology, and shiny things, but it was quiet, too quiet. He had no family around, no wife, no children, no one to share meals with. Every room was big and full of things, yet the house felt empty. He had hundreds of employees, but none of them really knew him. They respected him, feared him, but didn't love him. And maybe that was how he wanted it. Or maybe, deep inside, he wished for more. Every day, Thomas followed a strict routine. He woke up early, worked out in his private gym, ate a perfectly prepared breakfast made by a chef he'd barely talked to, and then sat through long meetings with important people. Everything was organized, perfect, and efficient. But the truth was he was tired. Not physically tired, but tired in a way he couldn't explain. Tired of the same faces, tired of pretending to smile, tired of pretending that everything was fine when something inside him was not. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Thomas was invited to a big charity event. He didn't really want to go. Events always felt fake to him. Rich people came dressed in designer clothes, donated money, took pictures, and left feeling good about themselves. It felt more like a show than real help. But his assistant reminded him that his name was on the list of speakers, and skipping it would look bad in the media. So, he dressed up, put on his best smile, and went. The event was held at a luxury hotel, full of expensive flowers, soft music, and shiny floors. People sipped wine and laughed politely. Thomas stood at the podium, gave a short, powerful speech about change, technology, and helping others. Everyone clapped. He stepped down, shook hands, posed for photos, and pretended to enjoy small talk. But after an hour, he felt suffocated. He quietly slipped out of a side door and walked away from the crowd. The hotel was near a public park, a place he had seen many times from his car but never stepped into. On a sudden impulse, he crossed the street and entered the park. It was cloudy and a little chilly. The trees swayed gently in the wind, and the sound of children laughing filled the air. People sat on benches, walked their dogs, or simply enjoyed the fresh air. It felt peaceful, honest. For the first time in months, Thomas felt like he could breathe. He kept walking, trying to stay unnoticed. No one recognized him without his suit, watch, and security team. He liked it that way. He passed a group of teenagers playing basketball, a couple feeding birds, and a man playing the violin near the fountain. He smiled to himself. This place was alive in a way his mansion was not. Then he saw her. She was sitting alone on a bench. Near a tree, a paper lunch bag next to her, and a small book in her hand. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old. Her skin was dark, her braids neatly tied with purple beads. Her clothes were simple but clean. She looked calm. Not sad, but there was something quiet in her eyes, like she had learned to be alone. Thomas didn't know why, but he stopped walking. Something about her pulled him in. She didn't notice him at first, as she was reading her book, slowly chewing a sandwich from the paper bag. After a few moments, she looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't smile or look away. Instead, she tilted her head and asked, in the softest voice, "Can I eat with you?" Thomas blinked. He wasn't sure he had heard her right, pointed at himself. "Me." She nodded. "Yeah, you can sit here if you want." He hesitated for a second. Then he walked over and sat beside her. The bench was cold, and the wind picked up slightly, but he didn't mind. He hadn't eaten lunch, and suddenly, he wasn't hungry for food. He was hungry for this moment. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Amani," she said. "What's yours?" He thought for a second. For some reason, he didn't want to say Thomas Bellamy, billionaire, so he just said Thomas. She nodded and offered him half of her sandwich. He was surprised. You're sharing your lunch with me? Amani shrugged. I always bring extra, just in case. In case of what? In case someone's hungry. Thomas smiled. It was a real smile, not the fake ones he gave at events. Thank you, he said, taking the sandwich. It was peanut butter and jelly, simple and sweet. It tasted better than any fancy dish he had eaten in a long time. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Thomas glanced at her book. What are you reading? It's about stars, she said. I want to be an astronaut. It's a big dream, I know. But someone has to do it, right? He nodded slowly. Yes, someone does. Looked at him for a moment. Do you come to the park a lot? No, he admitted. It's my first time. Why today? He paused. I guess I needed some fresh air. Needed to get away. Smiled. A little. Yeah, me too. I come here when Mama's working late. I don't like being home alone. Thomas felt something in his chest, something tight, something sad. Your mom works a lot? Amani nodded. 2 jobs? She's a cleaner and a waitress. She's tired all the time, but she's nice. He didn't know what to say to that. He had built companies, negotiated billion-dollar deals, given speeches to thousands of people, but he didn't know how to talk to a little girl with dreams and struggles he couldn't imagine. Yet, sitting there, eating half a sandwich and talking about stars, he felt more human than he had in years. They talked a bit more.
About books.
About school, about favorite colors and funny cartoons. She laughed once, really laughed, and it made Thomas smile wider than he had in a long time. After a while, Amani looked at her watch. I have to go. Mama will be home soon. Will you be here tomorrow? Thomas asked. Yeah, same time. I'll come, he said before thinking. Okay, she said, slinging her backpack over her shoulders. Bye, Thomas. Amani. He watched her walk away, her small frame disappearing around the trees. He sat on the bench for a few more minutes, looking at the empty space beside him, still feeling her presence. Then he got up and walked back toward the hotel, but something inside him had changed. That night, he sat in his huge kitchen, food untouched on the table. He kept thinking about a little girl with purple beads in her hair and a heart big enough to share her lunch with a stranger. Her voice echoed in his mind. Can I eat with you? No one had asked him that in years, not out of interest or kindness, but simply to share a moment. And it broke something inside. It's him, not in a bad way, in the way a wall breaks so that light can come in. That night, Thomas Bellamy didn't sleep much. He kept thinking about Amani, about stars, about sandwiches and silence and dreams. For the first time in a long time, wasn't thinking about money or meetings or numbers. He was thinking about people, and he couldn't wait to go back to the park. The next morning, Thomas Bellamy woke up feeling something new in his chest. Couldn't name it exactly, but it felt warm, soft, and somehow strange. He sat up in bed, stretched, and looked around his large, perfect room. The walls were spotless. The furniture expensive, and the windows reached the ceiling, but none of that seemed to matter now. All he could think about was a little girl with bright eyes and a peanut butter sandwich. He didn't know why, but he had slept better than he had in weeks. Her voice, so small yet full of quiet strength, kept playing in his mind. Her words were simple, but they had touched him in a way that no business deal or award ever had. Can I eat with you? That one question had shaken something loose. Inside him, as the day passed, he couldn't focus on his work. During meetings, he found himself drifting away. His team was showing him a new product design, something high-tech and worth millions. But all he saw in his mind was that wooden bench under the tree, the girl reading her book, the way she had offered him half her sandwich without thinking twice. His assistant asked if he was feeling okay. Thomas nodded, but the truth was he was not okay. He was distracted, confused, and a little nervous. Kept looking at the clock, waiting for it to hit 3 in the afternoon. Finally, after pretending to be busy, he stood up from his office chair and told his team he had something important to take care of. Without explaining further, he left his glass office and stepped into his car. His driver looked surprised but said nothing as Thomas gave him an address near the same park. When he got there, the sky was clearer than the day before. The air felt crisp, and sunlight fell softly through the leaves of the tall trees. People were out against him walking slowly, others rushing past, but Thomas was only looking for one small face in the crowd. And then he saw her. Amani was sitting on the same bench, wearing a different dress but the same pair of old sneakers. She was reading again, her lunch bag beside her and her backpack leaning against the bench. As soon as she looked up and saw him, her face lit up, not a big smile, but a quiet, happy recognition. It was a look that said, "You came back." Walked over and asked, "Is this seat taken?" Amani laughed softly. "Only if you brought your own sandwich." Thomas sat down, holding up the bag he had brought. "I brought two, just in case." "Smart move," she said, opening her lunch. They ate together again. This time Thomas had gone to a small deli and bought fresh sandwiches, fruit, and even cookies. He handed Amani a neatly packed container and she accepted it politely. She still pulled out her usual peanut butter sandwich, though, and offered him half again. He smiled and took it. "Best sandwich I've had all week." She shrugged. "It's just peanut butter." "It's more than that," he said. They sat in silence for a bit, chewing slowly. The noise of the park surrounded them, birds, barking dogs, distant laughter, but their little space on the bench felt like its own small world. "So," he asked gently, "did you go to school today?" "Yeah, math quiz."
"I think I did okay."
She said, "I like math. It makes sense. People don't always make sense, but numbers do." Thomas nodded. "You're right. Numbers are easy. People are complicated." She looked up at him with curious eyes. "What do you do, Thomas?" He paused. He wasn't ready to tell her the full truth yet. Somehow being Thomas Bellamy around her felt like putting on a mask, and he didn't want to wear masks with her. "Not here, not now. I work with computers," he said, honestly. She nodded, satisfied. "Cool. I like computers. My school has two in the library, but they're always slow. Maybe I can help fix that," he said without thinking. She looked at him sideways. "How?" "I know people who fix computers," he added quickly. Not wanting to say too much, she accepted the answer and went back to eating. Over the next few days, this little meeting turned into a habit. Every afternoon at around 3 o'clock, Thomas would leave his office early and go to the park. He'd sit on the same bench with Amani, and they'd eat together. Sometimes they talked about school or books. Sometimes they just sat and watched. The world moved by. She told him about her mom, her teachers, her classmates. She talked about her favorite cartoon and her secret dream to become an astronaut, go to the moon. Thomas listened to everything like it was the most important story in the world. He noticed things about Hertha, ways she never complained, even when tired. The way she chose her words carefully. The way she asked questions like someone much older. She wasn't loud or dramatic. She didn't beg or talk about being poor. She just existed with quiet pride. One day she showed up with a notebook. "You help me with something?" she asked. "Of course," Thomas said. She opened the notebook and pointed to a math problem. It was division, the kind he hadn't done in years. But he sat with her and slowly worked through it. He showed her tricks he remembered, ways to make it simpler. She smiled and said, "You're good at this." "Thanks," he replied. "I had a good teacher once. She told me to always show my work." "Mine says that too," Amani said. As the days passed, Thomas started to notice how different Amani's life was from his own when he was a child. He remembered private schools, tutors, summer camps. She had none of those things. And yet her mind was sharp, her words thoughtful, her heart strong. He started asking gentle questions. "Do you like your school?" "It's okay," she said. "Sometimes the roof leaks when it rains." "Do you get lunch there?" "Not always. Mama says we can't always afford the extra fee." Thomas felt something burn in his throat, but he stayed quiet. "And your mom?" He asked. "How is she always working?" she said. "But she's the best. When she comes home, even when she's tired, she still braids my hair, and sometimes she sings." Not always in tune, Amani laughed, but I like it. Chuckled softly. She sounds like a superhero. She is, Amani said proudly. Don't wear a cape, though. That night, Thomas sat at his long dining table with a meal prepared by professional chefs, but he barely touched the food. He thought of Amani's school, the leaking roof, the lunch she sometimes missed. He thought of her mother working too. Jobs and still finding the strength to sing. He thought about how many Amanis might be out there, invisible to the world. Bright, beautiful souls with no one to listen to them, and something inside him shifted again. He started researching that night. Quietly, without telling anyone, he looked up schools in Amani's area, read articles about low-income families, about how many children skipped meals, about how many schools didn't have working computers or clean bathrooms. The numbers broke his heart. He had always looked at numbers as tools, things to make decisions. Now these numbers felt like stories, real painful, human stories. He saw them differently now. At work, people noticed he was changing. He was quieter in meetings, more thoughtful. When someone proposed cutting a school donation program, he said no without blinking. When a manager complained about sponsoring underprivileged kids for internships, Thomas gave him a long, cold look and said, "Make it happen." No one knew what had gotten into him, but Thomas knew. Every day in the park was teaching him something money never could. And then, one day, something different happened. He came to the bench at the usual time, but Amani wasn't there. He looked around. He waited. He walked through the park, hoping she was just late. But she never came. He felt a strange kind of panic. Not the kind that came with losing a deal or missing a flight. This was deeper, more personal. It was worry. He came back the next day. Still no Amani. On the third day, he waited an hour, then two. He sat on the bench with both sandwiches untouched. Finally, he stood up, looked at the sky, and whispered, "Where are you, Amani?" That night, Thomas made a decision. He would find her. He didn't know exactly how, but he had money. He had power. Now, he had a reason. For the first time in his life, he would use all his resources not to build a company or grow his wealth, but to find a little girl who had shared her sandwich. Changed his world. He didn't know yet what he would find, but he knew this. He had to try. Thomas Bellamy couldn't stop thinking about Amani. For 3 days, she hadn't come to the park. The same park bench, under the same tree, stood empty, and every time he looked at it, it felt colder, lonelier, and somehow smaller. The little spot that once felt full of light and laughter now felt hollow. He kept waiting, hoping she'd appear like before with her little book, her paper lunch bag, and her gentle smile. But each day passed without her. Thomas felt something he wasn't. Used to feeling helplessness. He had money, power, influence. He could change the future of companies with a phone call. He could start projects worth millions and end them with a single word. But now, all that strength felt useless because he couldn't find one little girl who'd become the most important part of his day. He stayed up that night staring at the ceiling, her voice echoing in his head. "Can I eat with you?" He remembered her eyes, curious, kind. He remembered her stories, her dreams of space, her mother's tired songs, her math quiz, her peanut butter sandwich. Every little detail felt like a thread pulling at his heart. The next morning, he made a decision. No more waiting. He got up. Dressed in plain clothes, nothing flashy or expensive, and left the house before sunrise. His driver was surprised but didn't ask questions. Thomas told him to head straight to the neighborhood near the park. This time he wasn't just visiting, he was searching. He began by walking around the streets. It was a working-class neighborhood. The kind of place where the sidewalks were cracked and the buildings had peeling paint. The local stores were small and old-fashioned, with handwritten signs and dusty windows. Laundry hung from balconies, and kids played in narrow alleys. Thomas felt out of place at first, but he kept walking. He showed people a sketch of Amani that he had drawn from memory. It wasn't perfect, his drawing skills were rusty, but her bright eyes and hair beads were clearly there. "Have you seen this girl?" he asked again and again. Most people shook their heads. Some barely looked at him. A few offered guesses, but none were helpful. Hours passed. He checked every corner near the park, talked to shopkeepers, even went into a local school pretending to be a volunteer. But no one seemed to know her. The sun began to set. His feet ached. His throat was dry, but he didn't want to stop. Then something happened. He was walking past a small grocery store when a boy tugged at his sleeve. "I saw her," the boy said. Thomas turned quickly. "You did? Where?" "She lives down the street near the red building." "With her mom? They moved there last year. Can you show me?" The boy nodded and began walking. They turned corners and crossed narrow roads. Finally, they stopped in front of a worn-out apartment building. The windows were small, the walls stained, but children's voices could be heard from inside. Thomas looked at the boy and said, "Thank you." He gave him a warm smile and a few folded bills, which the boy accepted with wide eyes. Before running off, Thomas hesitated outside the building. What if she wasn't home? What if she didn't want to see him? He took a breath and stepped inside. The staircase was dimly lit. He climbed slowly, listening for any sound that might guide him. On the third floor, he heard a soft humming. Woman's voice. It was off-key, but full of warmth. Something inside him stirred. He knocked gently. The door opened slowly. A tired-looking woman stood there, wearing an apron and holding a dish towel. Her eyes were cautious but kind. "Yes," she asked. "Hi. I'm looking for Amani," Thomas said carefully. The woman blinked. "Why?" "I'm a friend," he said. "From the park." The woman studied his face for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." Thomas entered the small apartment. It was simple but clean. A small couch, a coffee table with coloring books, and a narrow kitchen that smelled of rice and lentils. Amani was sitting at the table, her head down, drawing. When she looked up and saw him, her eyes widened. "Thomas," he smiled. "Hey, astronaut." She jumped up and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. He bent down and hugged her back, gently but tightly. "I thought you forgot about me," she whispered. "Never," he said. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Her mother cleared her throat softly. "I'm sorry, she's been sick for a few days. Fever, nothing serious, but I kept her home." Thomas turned to her. "I'm glad she's okay now. I was really worried." Monty's mom offered him a seat, and they all sat down together. She introduced herself as Neo Strong, soft-spoken, and clearly proud of her daughter. She looked tired, with shadows under her eyes, but she held herself with quiet dignity. They talked for a while. Thomas listened as Nia explained how hard it was to balance two jobs, how she wished she could give Amani more, but life was tough, and rent didn't wait. "I try to be there for her," she said, "even if I'm always working." Thomas nodded slowly. "She speaks very highly of you." Nia smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "She's a good kid. Too good for all this." That night, Thomas left their apartment with a full heart. Something had changed again, deeply, permanently. He knew now that he couldn't just visit Amani. He couldn't just talk and listen, and leave. He had to do something. He returned home and called his most trusted legal advisor. "I need to set up something," he said.
Foundation.
Quiet. Private. For children like Amani. The lawyer asked, "How much do you want to start with?" Thomas paused. 100 million. There was silence on the other end of the call. Thomas added, "And I want to handle the first case personally." The next few weeks were busy, but in a different way than usual. Thomas was still running his company, but his mind was always on Amani and her world. He visited her often. Sometimes they met in the park, sometimes at her apartment. He helped her with schoolwork, brought her books, even took her to a science museum one Saturday, where she spent hours staring at stars inside the planetarium. One evening, Thomas brought a surprise. He handed Nia a thick envelope. "What's this?" she asked, confused. "Your rent paid for the next 2 years," he said softly. "And a new job offer at one of my offices. Flexible hours, full health insurance, good pay." Yeah. Stared at him in shock. "I don't understand." She whispered. "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to accept it for Amani." She looked at her daughter, who was smiling brightly. Then she turned back to Thomas and said, "Thank you." And that was just the beginning. The foundation Thomas created began helping families like Amani's all over the city, quietly, without media attention or press releases. He didn't want credit. He didn't want headlines. He just wanted change. He donated computers to schools, paid for lunch programs, gave scholarships to smart kids with big dreams, but no matter how big the impact grew, Amani remained his center. They kept meeting in the park. They still shared sandwiches. They still talked about math, books, and stars. One day, Amani said, "I told my teacher, I want to start a science club." Thomas grinned. "That's a great idea." She said, "We don't have supplies." "You leave that to me," he said, and he meant it. Amani didn't know she had changed a billionaire's life. She didn't know that her small voice had broken through years of silence, pride, and loneliness. But Thomas knew. She wasn't just a little girl with dreams. She was the spark that lit a fire in his soul. And every time he saw her, every time she smiled, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Amani sat on her mother's lap, her small arms wrapped around her. As the evening breeze drifted through the window of their apartment, it was a calm, quiet moment. Outside, the street was full of life cars passing, people talking, children playing, but inside, everything felt warm and peaceful. Nia stroked her daughter's hair gently, her mind full of thoughts. She still couldn't believe how much had changed in such a short time, just a few months ago. She was juggling 2 cleaning jobs, barely sleeping, and worrying about how to put dinner on the table. She remembered crying quietly at night so Amani wouldn't hear. She remembered telling herself to be strong no matter how tired she was. But now, life was different. Still not perfect, but so much better. Thomas had entered their lives like a storm and then turned into shelter. He wasn't loud or dramatic. He didn't brag or talk too much. Just did things quietly, kindly, with heart. A job for Nia, a safe home. Books and supplies for Amani, even groceries some weeks, left at the door without a word. More than anything, he gave them time. Time to breathe. Time to talk. Time to laugh. Thomas became a regular part of their lives. He would visit twice a week, sometimes more. He and Amani would go to the park, to the museum, or just sit on the floor playing board games. Sometimes he helped Amani with math homework, drawing out planets and rocket ships on paper to explain hard problems in a fun way. One day, after a long day at work, Nia came home to find Thomas and Amani in the kitchen making peanut butter cookies. There was flour everywhere. Amani had dough on her nose. The oven timer was beeping. They both looked up and shouted, "Surprise!" Nia laughed for the first time in days, not a polite smile. A real full laugh that made her stomach hurt. That night, after Amani went to bed, Thomas stayed a little longer. Nia sat across from him, sipping tea. For a while, neither of them said much. They didn't need to. The quiet felt full. Finally, Nia said, "You've done so much for us. I don't even know how to thank you." Thomas shook his head gently. "You don't have to. Amani gave me something I didn't even know I needed." She looked at him curiously. "She reminded me what it feels like to care, to connect, to be seen." Nia blinked. She understood more than he realized. As a mother, she had often felt invisible. To the world, just another tired woman cleaning floors, rushing to daycare, missing meetings, stretching every dollar. But when Thomas looked at her, he didn't see just her struggles. He saw her strength. He finished his tea and stood up. "There's something I want to do," he said, "but I'll only do it if you're okay with it." "What is it?" "I want to enroll Amani in the best private school in the city. Science-focused, full scholarship, everything covered." Ania's eyes widened. "She'll have a better future there. Real labs, smart classmates, big dreams." Nia felt tears coming, but she held them back. "But she'll be far away from home, from her friends." "She won't be alone," he said softly. "I'll be there. You'll always be her home." That night, Nia couldn't sleep. She kept looking at her daughter, who slept peacefully. Hugging a teddy bear Thomas had given her, a better school meant a better life. But it also meant change, risk. letting go a little. The next morning, Naya asked Amani, how would you feel about going to a new school? One with big science labs and space clubs? Amani's eyes lit up. Like the ones on TV? Even better. Nia smiled. I'd miss my friends, Amani said, thoughtful. But can I still see you after school? Every day. Then yes. Yes, the next few weeks moved fast. There were meetings, tests, interviews. Amani aced them all. She wore her best dress to the school tour and whispered wow at every classroom. Thomas walked beside her, proud like a father. Naya followed. Quietly overwhelmed, but grateful. Soon, Amani became a student at the prestigious Brookstone Academy. Her uniform was too big at first, and the bus stop was far, but she didn't complain. She loved her new classes, her kind teachers, the science lab that smelled like plastic and glass. She started a Girls Who Dream Big club with 3 other students and asked Thomas to come speak to them one day. He said yes. Of course, at home, things continued to improve. Nia's new job was stable. She worked in an office now, not on her knees scrubbing floors. She had coworkers who respected her. She had evenings free with her daughter. She even started writing again short poems, like she used to when she was young. One Sunday, they all went to the planetarium again. Amani sat between Thomas and Naya, holding both their hands. She pointed up excitedly at every star, every planet. She whispered facts she had memorized. And when the lights dimmed and the dome filled with galaxies, she rested her head on Thomas's shoulder and whispered, I want to go there one day. You will, he said softly. I believe it. He truly did, but not everyone understood their bond. One afternoon, at a charity event, a reporter pulled Thomas aside. We've heard rumors, the man said, that you've been spending a lot of time in poorer neighborhoods. You're helping this one little girl. Is it charity or something else? Thomas's smile faded. He looked the man straight in the eyes and said, It's humanity. Try it sometime. The story never made it to the papers. No one dared challenge him after that. But Thomas became more protective. He didn't want fame, didn't want Amani to be seen as a project. She was a person, a child, a light. But still, word spread in quiet circles. Other billionaires noticed. Some mocked him. Others followed his lead. Slowly, quietly, kindness started to spread in places where money had once only chased profit, and still, at the center of it all was one small girl with beaded braids and a sky full of dreams. One evening, Thomas brought a special gift, a model rocket set with real launch features and build-it-yourself parts. Amani's eyes nearly popped out of her head. I've never seen anything like this, she shouted. Want to build it together? Thomas asked. They spent hours on the living room floor, piecing it together. Naya made hot chocolate and watched them heart full. As the final piece clicked into place, Thomas said, When it launches, make a wish. Amani closed her eyes. Thomas whispered, What did you wish for? She smiled. To take you and Mama with me when I go to the stars. He didn't reply right away. His throat felt tight. He simply nodded, pulled her close, and whispered, That's the best wish I've ever heard. Time moved forward, as it always does. Seasons changed. Leaves turned red. Then the snow came. Then flowers. Amani grew taller. Her reading list grew longer. Her dreams grew wilder. She started talking about space camps, coding classes, women scientists she admired. She even gave a short speech in school about black female astronauts. She said, We don't need to ask if we can sit at the table. We'll build our own spaceship. The audience clapped for minutes. Thomas clapped the loudest. One night, Thomas sat alone in his big house. He looked at the pictures on his wall. All the awards. The photos with famous people, the newspaper covers, and then, in the center, was a drawing Amani had made for him. A stick figure in a suit standing on the moon, holding a child's hand. Underneath it said, Thank you for looking up and seeing me. He stared at that drawing for a long, long time. The next morning, Thomas called his assistant. I'm retiring. What? Stepping down. I'll stay on the board. But I need time. For real things. She didn't argue. She knew better. Thomas had made his fortune. Now, he wanted to spend it wisely, not just on stocks or business, but on people. Especially one small girl who had asked him, not for money or gifts, but simply, "Can I eat with you?" That question had changed his entire world, and every day since he had answered it the same way. Yes, always. Time had passed. Seasons had come and gone, but one thing remained constant: the bond between Thomas Bellamy and Imani. It was no longer just the billionaire and the little girl who once asked, "Can I eat with you?" It had grown into something deeper, like family. Imani was now in her late teens, tall and confident, with the same bright eyes that once lit up when she talked about space. She was no longer the shy girl sitting quietly on the park bench, had blossomed into a leader among her peers, always encouraging others to dream big. Just as Thomas had inspired her to do, Thomas watched her with pride, but also with a bit of awe. He never imagined that helping one child could change his entire life. It had been more than charity or kindness. It was a lesson in hope, connection, and purpose. One sunny morning, Imani woke up early. She was nervous and excited at the same time. Today was important. It was the day she was to give a speech at a global youth conference about education and opportunity. Thomas had helped organize it, but she was the star. She dressed carefully, wearing a simple blue dress and her favorite silver necklace, a gift from Thomas on her 12th birthday. Her hair was braided with bright beads, just like when they first met. She practiced her speech one last time in front of the mirror, her voice steady but full of emotion. Thomas arrived to pick her up, carrying a bouquet of flowers. "Ready?" he asked with a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," Imani said. They drove to the conference center, where hundreds of young people from around the world had gathered. Some were from wealthy families, others from places that faced poverty and hardship, just like Imani had once known. But all of them shared a dream, a better future. When Imani stepped onto the stage, the room went silent. She looked out at the crowd and saw faces full of hope, curiosity, and a hunger for change. She took a deep breath and began. She spoke about her journey, the days when she had no money for lunch, the fear of being invisible, and the kindness of a stranger who had become her guardian angel. She spoke about her mother, who worked tirelessly to provide for her, and about the power of education to open doors that once seemed locked. Opportunity, Shay said, is not just about money. It's about someone believing in you. It's about someone seeing you when no one else does. Her voice was clear, passionate, and honest. The audience listened, some with tears in their eyes. After her speech, Imani was surrounded by young people asking questions and sharing their own stories. Thomas watched from the side, feeling a mix of emotions: pride, happiness, and a quiet sadness that time was passing so quickly. That evening, as they drove home, Imani turned to Thomas. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." Thomas smiled. "No, thank you. You taught me more than you know." They arrived home, where Nia was waiting with a warm dinner. The house was filled with laughter and stories from the day. It felt like a family, a real family. As weeks turned into months, Imani's life continued to grow. She graduated from Brookstone Academy with honors and earned a scholarship to a top university, where she planned to study astrophysics. Thomas continued to support her and other young dreamers through the foundation he had created, which now helped hundreds of children from different backgrounds. But their journey wasn't without challenges. There were moments of doubt, times when Imani wondered if she was good enough, or if the world was ready to accept a girl like her in places she dreamed of. There were days when Thomas questioned if he could do enough, if his efforts could truly change the world. One evening, after a long day, Imani called Thomas. She was upset. "I got rejected," she said quietly. "From the internship program I wanted so badly." Thomas listened carefully. "I'm sorry, Imani, that hurts. I feel like no matter how hard I try, I'm always one step behind." Thomas took a deep breath. "You're not behind, you're learning. Every no brings you closer to a yes. Remember when you built that rocket? It didn't launch perfectly the first time, did it?" Imani smiled weakly. No, but I kept trying. That's the spirit, Thomas said firmly. The stars aren't easy to reach, but you will get there. Amani wiped her tears and felt a new strength growing inside her. She was not alone. She had a whole team behind her, including a billionaire who had once been lost in his own world but had found a new purpose in hers. Years later, Amani became a successful scientist, working at a space agency where she designed instruments too. Explored distant planets. She used her voice to inspire young girls everywhere, sharing her story in books, talks, and social media. Her message was simple. No matter where you come from, no matter what challenges you face, your dreams are valid. Thomas retired fully from business. He dedicated his time to mentoring young people, traveling to remote communities to listen and help. He found peace in the small things, quiet mornings with coffee, long talks with Nia, and visits with Amani, who always reminded him of the power of kindness. One day, Thomas received an invitation. It was from the United Nations. It's asking him to speak about his foundation's work and how a simple act of sharing a meal had changed many lives. He prepared his speech carefully, thinking about how to explain the journey. When the day came, he stood before world leaders, activists, and young people. He told them about a little girl in a park, a question that broke through his walls, and a promise he made to never look away. He ended by saying, "The world can be better. It's not just with money or power, but with heart. If we see each other not as strangers, but as family, we can build a future where every child can sit at the table and share their dreams." The audience gave him a standing ovation. But Thomas didn't feel like a hero. He felt grateful. Grateful for Amani, for Naya, and for the small, simple moment that had changed everything. Back home, as Thomas sat with Naya and Amani, watching the sunset, he realized something. Life is not about what you have. It's about what you give. And sometimes, a small question, "Can I eat with you?" can open the door to the biggest change. Amani smiled at him, her eyes shining. "Thank you for always saying yes." Thomas reached out, holding her hand gently. "Always, kiddo. Always." And in that moment, their hearts were full of love, hope, and endless possibilities.